Does this one feel different as a GM than all the ones before?
Oh, the Senior Bowl?
Yeah.
For sure. At its core, it's still evaluation of talent, which it always was and always will be. But what's kind of cool for me is I keep telling people, and all my buddies around the league are asking what the difference is, and I keep telling them it's having skin in the game. And if you're a former player or coach or whatever and you lose that, I think at its core, that's what you miss most. And what's cool for me is being in the team meetings, watching these kids learn, try to process information, bring it out on the field, watching our coaches coach. Now, I've known most of these guys for years, being on the grass with them, being in the meetings with them. It reinforces to me how good our staff is. It's really a good feeling. And then I have a staff, and we sat down for 3 hours last night and evaluated both teams position by position. And I asked each of our scouts, because a different scout has got a different position group throughout the week, and I just asked them to go one through whatever. And so for me, that's a little different too, because it was usually me and DJ and Charles Davis kind of exchanging a note or two here, but here's a formal process of walking through it. And it was a really good session, and it brought up a lot of issues about how we're going to, because the scouts come in town next week for a couple of weeks and for our draft meetings, and it brought up an awful lot of issues by position that I want to make sure we address during our draft meetings. So it really has been a good process.
How about the just advantage from being in the broadcast booth? I know you guys can listen to players be mic'd up, and you got really good camera angles versus being on the field, and just that advantage.
Well, I don't think there's much of a difference this week for that. I actually rather be on the field because I'm going to watch the film of the practice anyway. Like when I get done here, I'm going back to the room and I'm going to watch the South practice, not on the NFL Network, but on our film. So I'm going to get to see that. What I like about being on the field is I like watching the kids react to calls. I like seeing which guy's eyes open up as they're trying to remember a play, or who's taking control, who's the off-the-ball linebacker that's taking control, which safety's communicating. I can't pick that up in the booth. I can when I'm at practice.
Does more evaluation of prospects happen this week on the field or in these meeting rooms where you're getting a sense of who they are and how quickly they pick up?
It's a really good blend. And I had a conversation with a veteran scout from another team today who was talking about how, there are certain traps in this process, and you always have to go back to the film of them at their schools. So we're gathering information this week, and I've always loved Senior Bowl more than Combine because there are pads on, and you're playing, and you're trying to absorb information and play the game of football. However, we place all this emphasis on the one-on-one drills. We did it at the NFL Network. I'm the one that pushed it. I thought that one-on-one drills were best for the audience and for the evaluators. However, there's a trap there. A kid can come out here and flash. A kid with really good natural ability and talent can come out here and have one great week and put it all together. But you got to go back and say, well, why was he just kind of an average college player for 3 years? Why couldn't he get on the field? Why didn't he play more consistently? So there's a trap at the Combine. There's a trap at the Senior Bowl. You always have to go back to what they did on their college tape. And to me, this is a great cross-check. It forces you to go back and reevaluate some players.
In years past, I'm sure people came to you and asked for your opinion about things. You find yourself catching yourself, you can't really give away too much now. I'm sure you can't really answer their questions much as you could in the past.
Well, it's as I said on the NFL Network today, basically, and these are my buddies I'm sitting in the booth with, and they were rolling, the one-on-ones were going, and Daniel Jeremiah was like, hey, Mike, why don't you roll with this one? I'm like, hey, DJ. A year ago, my job was to give out as much information as I can, and this year it's quite the opposite. And they started laughing, and but it's the truth. I caught myself wanting to talk about these things. And Vic, I'll tell you one thing that's important, I think, for me, is the last, 15, 16 years, my job has been A, to give out information, B, evaluate. So I'm talking a lot, and what I have to be is a better listener. I've got a staff of scouts now. I've got to not only listen to them, but I can't always let them know what I think because I want their true evaluations as opposed to being colored by what the GM thinks. So I'm kind of trying to train myself a little bit because I got a big friggin' mouth when I talk football, and I got to watch myself a little bit.
This might be a sensitive question, but how much during this pre-draft process are you scouting your scouts? These guys are very new to you, just to get a sense of certain guys and their approaches to their jobs.
I don't think it's a sensitive question. I think they all know that they're being evaluated right now. Look, the Oakland Raiders have been to one playoff in 16 years, and my original messages to the scouts when I came in was, let's be really honest where we're starting. Let's not sugarcoat it. Let's be honest about where we're starting. Because the only way we're going to get any better is if we define that and then define the process by how we're going to get better. So to me, you're always looking to upgrade everywhere. Okay, so these guys know they're on notice. The new GMs in the building. I've got an awful lot of relationships over the years, and it's okay. I don't mind them being on edge a little bit.
Have there been any surprises in your first month on the job?
I think I don't know if it's a surprise, but I guess what it is surprising, because I've got a lot of, let's face it, I've been doing this for a lot of years, and a lot of my buddies that are GMs now started as area scouts. And I kind of watched them move up in this industry, and so I've shared an awful lot of secrets with a bunch of guys around the league, and all of them have commented that when they became general manager, they couldn't believe how much of their time is taken away from non-quote tape watching, football-related stuff. So I kind of knew it walking in the door, but I wasn't really prepared for how much of that can happen. And I have to do a better job of prioritizing and delegating so that I'm doing my core job, which is trying to bring more football talent into the building. And that's I think the hard. Every one of those guys has said the same thing to me. Every one of them came up to me this week. I can't tell you how many really good conversations I had with high-level people around the league that just kind of hugged me this week and said, whatever you need, we'll help you. What are you dealing with? And this was kind of the conversation. How do you deal with some of the other stuff that a GM has to deal with while still maintaining proper respect for what the core job is?
Paul Gunther was talking yesterday about the first time that he met you, some like 20-odd years ago, and he said at that point you were working in commercial real estate. Before the product. Were you doing player evaluation at that point, and in what capacity? Were you just like watching football and evaluating guys? Or?
It's funny. I think Paul's first visit as a college coach at Ursinus College as a Division III coach was my dad's high school.
Right.
Yeah.
Did he tell you that?
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's kind of amazing some of the story. Richie Bisaccia and I go back to 19 years old at Joe Namath's football camp in Quinnipiac, Connecticut. Two slappy 19-year-olds, just nerdy guys that love ball. And we met each other then, and we've been friends ever since. Go figure. How do we end up at the Oakland Raiders all these years later? But the thing about, so what happened to me in a nutshell was I got hurt playing for the Giants. I went into commercial real estate. I knew right away I needed football, and I couldn't. So I started volunteering as a radio announcer locally in Philadelphia high schools. So while I was progressing in the commercial real estate world, because I was married with a couple kids, and you got to pay the bills, and doing high school games on the radio wasn't going to pay the bills. So I started doing anything I could related to football camps in the Philadelphia area, helping out my high school. Doing more and more games on the radio or television. ESPN had me doing arena, CFL, sideline reporting for New Jersey Network, and meanwhile I'm still doing commercial real estate to pay the bills. And the television wasn't about television. The television was about football. It was, how do I get to scratch this itch, because I can't live without it. Paul knew me from commercial real estate days, but I was still doing ESPN and all that other stuff, and it was really just about being on the grass with coaches, watching film, staying current. So all those years I was evaluating just kind of a different way.
After you kind of formally took the job, you were talking about really wanting to take a deep dive into the roster in those early days. Is there anything general that you feel like that you found from that investigation into the roster and where you guys sit and how you want to move forward with all these picks and all this money?
Well, it's a fair question. I think the basis of walking in the door day one was forming an opinion on where we were today.
Yeah.
Okay, and to do that, it had to be part my evaluation and part John and I sitting down, which I think is the best thing we have going for us right now, is that the head coach and the general manager are truly on the same page as far as what we're looking for from football players. And the point I want to make that I think is really important is that we are a completely open and transparent building right now as far as the coaches and the scouts. And I don't know what was going on before, and I'm not going to comment about anything else. All I'm going to tell you is that, and I've said this before to people, the common denominator of dysfunctional football buildings are when the coaches and the scouts don't have a true relationship that transpires both ways. And my goal walking in the building day one was to kind of use my relationship with the coaching staff. And there's a bunch of them. I can walk in at 5:30 in the morning with a cup of coffee and sit down with any of them, okay, and talk ball, and talk about their positions, and talk about what they're looking for. And the point I made with Coach Gruden and the entire staff has been, we're going to give you everything we have. And I'm, for instance, just coming here for this game, we handed them a binder this thick. Each position coach got a binder with every player at his position in the game, all of our scouting reports, all of our grades, all of our background information. The coaches were just like, this is awesome. And my point to them is, it's open, we're not hiding anything in this building. And when we get back from Senior Bowl, I'm going to expect that every position coach is going to put into our grading system on our computers, we have a new coaches tab in there, and I'm going to want a summary of every player, what we learned on and off the field. And my point is, we're not breaking ground here. Okay, this is all common sense stuff that should be done. But the point is, I think that there are no walls in that building right now. It's a completely open building. The information's flowing both ways, and that's what's got me more juiced than anything.
I remember when at your introduction, when I think I asked, do you think Derek Carr is the future quarterback here? And that was going to be part of your investigation. Have you learned anything new about him in that month since, and formulated an opinion on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, look, when you look at 32 teams in this league, and there aren't 32 starting quarterbacks, yet we have one of them. Okay, he's a starting quarterback in the NFL. He can make every throw. We've got to do a better job of protecting him and giving him weapons. He played with 2 rookie tackles last year. We need to get more speed on offense. We need to be more dynamic. Derek Carr at this point is kind of the least of our problems.
Fair.
I don't know, I'm sure we're getting to players here, but is it fair to say that there's better pass rushers on the South team than on the North teams? Are more guys who are making possible impact guys?
Yeah, I mean, there's no secret that we need pass rushers. I think we have one defensive end under contract right now. So you might be lining up at 6'10". You got the body type, by the way. What's your hand size?
Not very good.
Okay. No, but seriously, everybody knows that right now. And so are we focused in on defensive ends? At this game, of course, we'd be dumb if we weren't. But, we're also looking we need pretty much everything on defense. So we're looking at every position. I think the South has some dynamic edge rushers. I think we have some guys in our room. I mean, so my point to you guys, which I think a lot of general managers say, and I think they believe it, but I truly believe it, is that there's so much publicity about the 3 first-round picks, which, gosh, I'm very appreciative, don't get it wrong. But I care as much about the 2 seventh-round picks as I do the 3 first-round picks. I care as much about our scouts doing a great job recruiting kids now for college free agents, so that when the draft's over, we're getting the best priority free agents out there. So to me, right now, we have 10 picks. I think we have 6 of the first 100. But let's not forget about the other rounds and every single pick. And this is what I've learned from my guys around the league for 18 years. Like, if you don't pay as much respect to that 7th-round kid and the free agent kid as the 1st-round kid, you'll never build a team. And I truly believe that. So we're looking at, my answer to you as far as the edge rushers and all that, trust me, we're ranking them, we're looking at them. I care as much about the 5th-round kid that might be really raw, that 3 years from now might be a really good player for the Raiders. But nobody else cares that much, but we do.
Certainly one of the most valuable parts of the pre-draft process, certainly the combine, is the medical. You're going to have your hands on that information more than ever before.
Correct.
What's the value of that at the combine next month?
Yeah.
Just getting your hands on that when you're completing the picture of your scouting profile.
Well, don't assume I never got the medical, okay, Mike? Okay.
Fair enough.
But because I kind of got in trouble a few times for having the medical. But it's a big piece of information. And what I think the combine is, I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's a cross-check. And it started years ago, as you guys all know, I think. It started because teams wanted to share medical information. That's why the combine started. It's turned in the Underwear Olympics, but that's what it was at its base. So The combine for me is another cross-check, and the medical and the character, alerts, you call them our alerts, they're huge. And we start to go through our board next week, as we start to stack our board for 2 weeks leading into the combine, we'll be putting up all kinds of different character alerts, and we've got some medical questions, but we don't have the medical alerts yet, and they'll come from the combine rechecks. The medical stuff is one of the last pieces that really comes in before the draft. So there's a bunch of guys that I have in my book that where all the scouts' information is two knees in the last 2 years, or some guys down here that got hurt, got to check on them. But medical is a huge piece of it, and I'm looking forward to coordinating that with our doctors and trainers.
I know we're talking a lot about college player evaluation, but as you head in, we're still a ways from free agency, but when you look at the salary cap space that you guys have, and the fact that there isn't, let's say, a first round draft pick with a big money contract extension coming up, that it just seems like that there's a lot of freedom in what you can do with that money and better in free agency. Is that intriguing to you as well? I know you talked somewhat about buyer beware with the A list, but just having that salary cap flexibility going into everything that you're doing, what kind of an advantage is that?
I think it's really critical to take advantage of all avenues of adding players to your roster, right? And the two most talked about are the draft and unrestricted free agency. So you've got to put your best foot forward and try to dominate each, right? And by dominate, you can mean different things, different definitions. We've got some money this year. John and I have already had probably, I don't know, we talk all the time. We've probably had at least 3 meetings just about free agency. We're stacking that board right now. I mean, as we speak, I'm going to get back there and go through, spend a couple days in free agency before we go into our draft meetings. So between John and I and our pro scouting staff, that's as important a board to stack as our college free agency, our college board. It's critical. We have some money. We'd love to come out of it with a couple starters, but what you're really trying to do is spend it judiciously and fill some holes. And we got an awful lot of holes, so we're not going to fill them all before the draft. But the more you can do in free agency, the more surgical you can be in the draft.
Where are you as a personnel staff in evaluating or assessing the junior crop for this draft?
Well, that's a good question. It's a little bit overwhelming. It gets more and more so every year. And I've given the scouts till I think it's Monday at 5 p.m. West Coast time to have all the junior reports in, because obviously we're going to stack our board starting Thursday. So all the reports got to be in. So this is a crazy week for our scouts because, we have this unbelievable, tremendous access here this week, better than they're used to having. We've had the scouts in the positional meetings, which they all love, and I love because, get in there and learn what Rich Bisaccia wants. Get in there and learn what Tom Cable wants. Hear how they coach, see what they do. So it's been awesome from that perspective. And what was the rest of it? I'm sorry. I'm just getting fired up about something.
Where you are.
So the junior thing, we're piling things on their plate, and I'm like, okay, I want all the reports in on the Senior Bowl by boom, and I want all this by boom. And they're looking at me. And by the way, to have everything into our system for meetings starting next Thursday, you got till Monday at 5 p.m. to get. So that, to answer your question, it's Monday at 5 p.m. I told the scouts today I'm way behind. I thought I was ahead because I got so much work done in the fall on anticipated juniors, but just the amount of them that came out when that list came out officially, and I went through it position by position, I was like, oh man, it'll be some late nights, man. So I'm behind personally, but our scouts are. That's another thing I'm not used to is saying, I got people helping me here. Yeah. I'm behind personally, mostly because this has been such a good week, but Monday at 5 we'll be up to speed.
I was just going to say, there are a couple small school guys here, FCS guys, who seem to be making some noise. Is that one of your favorite parts about this week, guys who, maybe some of us have never heard of before, kind of making a name for themselves?
Yeah, I think it's a cool week for that. This is my 3rd AllStar game in the last 10 days, so I was in Tampa for the East-West. A couple kids played well. One of them showed up this week, the kid from Udo, the kid from Elon. The offensive lineman, I was only there for 2 days. He popped the first day, and he got the invite to come up here. He's a big, long guy, and I don't know much about him coming from Elon. I didn't even know who he was going into Tampa, but you see a guy with 36-inch arms from a small school competing against guys with SEC stickers on their helmet, and I don't care where he ends up in the draft. I'm excited for that kid's opportunity. That happens every year, and for me, it's a really cool thing.
There might not be enough time in the calendar for this, but would you be open to facilitate the evaluation for early entry juniors to have some sort of a showcase game or some way to help scouts with the evaluation process when these guys decide?
I mean, I remember, I forget how many years ago, just back 6, 8, 10 years ago, I thought there was a move towards trying to move this game to Florida at Disney and make it open for underclassmen. And I think ESPN was making the push, and obviously I didn't want that because I'm NFL Network, and it's the only reason I remember it. I was worried about losing the game, you know. But there's been several pushes over the years towards trying to include underclassmen in some kind of process. And I think the NFL has been highly resistant to that because they don't want the colleges thinking that we're trying to poach. And I understand that. And I'm always about the sanctity of what the colleges want to do. But we're getting to the point where reality tells you that it's getting more and more kids are graduating on time. And I don't know if you guys know how many classes these kids take in the summers. I mean, my eyes were open because my son played at Villanova a few years ago, and he had to take like 4 classes every summer. I mean, if you don't graduate in 3.5 years these days, you're behind, right? So a lot of these kids are graduating earlier and giving themselves an opportunity to either stay and transfer somewhere or come out early with a degree. So that's a long way of saying that I think it's just become so obvious. Kids are coming out, and wouldn't it be a great way to showcase them and give us a better opportunity to evaluate?
Talk about attending the AllStar games, which I'm sure you were doing before. Just curious, to what extent has this last month, just in terms of how you're spending your time?
Yeah.
How has it been different? I mean, or how much has it been different? Do you feel like you're still doing the same things, just under
Well,
one
it goes
umbrella?
back a little bit to one of the first questions, which was being a little bit overwhelmed in the office with, quote, non-football stuff that comes across the general manager's desk, and trying to prioritize and utilize my time more efficiently, okay, which is kind of the first lesson I learned my first week. You know, when you're in the office at 5:30 in the morning and you look at your watch at 8 o'clock at night and you haven't watched any tape yet. But I'm being serious. It's like you go, I got to be better at this. This can't happen every day. So I've tried to get better from that perspective. I mean, so I'm dealing with some stuff I haven't dealt with in my past, which is fine. I got to be honest with you, I loved getting out on the road again. And I've had a couple of my GM buddies kind of grab me this week and say, don't ever change who you are. Every GM's a little different. Some GMs stay in the building 24/7 because they believe in that. Some GMs are on the road a lot. Some are somewhere in between. And I've always kind of been on the road because I like to smell the grass. I like to talk to the coaches. I like to see the players in their environment. I want to watch the film in their building. And I think I do a better job when I'm around the players and coaches. So for me, my roots are always going to be, and I hope they're always going to be, in the field, going to these all-star games, showing up at appropriate pro days or private workouts or whatever. I want to be in and around these guys, and because I think when you smell these kids, when you talk to these kids, when you know who they are, you do a better job evaluating them.
One other background question: when you first, when you were getting into, or I guess, generating the profile that you ended up having as a talent evaluator, did your methods of evaluation or analyzing these players, was that something you generated yourself, or did you draw on certain people in terms of how you actually go about it?
One of the beautiful things about what I've done the last 15 years is that, you see, I'm a coach's son, and I've spoke that language my whole life. So the thing that really helped me was when I got into this industry, and I'm talking about the TV industry. When I got into that years ago, I was showing up at pro days, and I was the only media guy there. This is, now it's popular, right? Back in the day, I'm showing up, with my book bag, like, hi, I'm Mike, and they're all like, get the F out of here, Mike. You're a media slappy, get out, and so you have to be real respectful of the process. And I'm a coach's son, and I love football, and I was very respectful of the entire process. And I think that's one of the reasons I've been able to build some relationships with some of these, the people that have helped me along the way. Is I took my time, I tried to respect the process that they go through and never interfere. And 3 years later, they're inviting me to the end of the 40-yard dash line to time with them, which I've been doing ever since. So I think I've gone through the process kind of with these guys, growing up with them. The only thing I didn't really do as a scout was I was not out in the fall at schools like they are. But the rest of the process, I was with those guys, and that's what a lot of these GMs have said: just respect who you are and stay true to who you are.
John got this question when he came out of the broadcast booth too, just because he has so much access from his position to other buildings and draft rooms and things like that, that a lot of people that work for other teams may not get. And
Right.
I guess, is there any insight that you think can be an advantage to you just in knowing how some of your counterparts think or tick or prioritize, certain
Yeah.
things that they're going through the draft board?
Yeah,
Do you think
I
that can
do.
be advantageous?
I do. I think that, again, my job was to be in all 32 buildings. I had a team that wanted to hire me several years ago that looked at that as an advantage. They were like, you're not scouting for any one scheme or any one team, you're scouting for the whole league the way you have to do it. And they like that, and they also like the fact that I had a lot of information on a lot of coaches and GMs around the league and what they prefer. And I think if most GMs have a profile. You can look at a guy like Bill Polian when he was in Indy, and Bill Polian liked big schools. He liked a lot of Big Ten guys. He rarely moved up or down the board. He stayed in his lane, and if he picked a guy a half round or around his guy, a half round or a round earlier than what the league value was, he didn't care. He wanted to get his guy. Then there are other people love to move up and down the board. A guy like Belichick. If his guy isn't there in the fourth, he's trying to move down or move up. Everybody's got a footprint. And I think I'm pretty familiar with a lot of them just because it was my job to be so.
Do you have a sense what yours will be, where your footprint will be? Do you know right now what will be your profile, or is that still kind of forming?
I don't know. I think it's a good question, Vic. I kind of look at it like I've always been, even on television, go back and listen to me, I've always been kind of like, okay, if I had the first pick in the draft or if I had 2 picks in the first, I'd be open for business. And I think you have to be. And I'm not trying to say I'm Vegas Mike or anything like that.
It's gonna stick.
That's him.
Yeah.
There's Vegas Mike. Yeah, I'm happy. Don't give me that one. I'm not trying to say any of that. I'm just saying that whether you have 10 picks or 4 picks in a draft, I think you have to be open to. Let's be honest. Would I move up to get somebody? Sure, I would. If it's the guy you feel like you have to have, but you're diminishing your odds a little bit when you trade up and give away draft picks. Most GMs, understand that mathematically, if you're going to hit a certain percentage, you do better with 12 picks than you will with 8, just mathematically. So, would you rather move down and pick up extra picks? Sure you would. But there are times when I think it's prudent to move up. And I think there are times when you're sitting there in a certain round and guys you have targeted to be there, and everybody talks about the first round, but it's no different in the fourth. If you have a cluster of guys in 4 that you want and you don't like them, you probably need to get out. Why take a guy you don't love? And sometimes you get stuck. That happens. But so I think my answer to that is a lot of it's common sense. And if you want to go get a guy, go get him. But for the most part, if you can move down and pick up extra picks, that's a good thing too.
On a personal note, you talked about the schedule, of what it looks like to be an NFL general manager and the hours that are required and the intensity to it all. You've had an opportunity to be a GM, or opportunities have come calling before in the past, and your decision to pursue this one, it wasn't just a personal decision, it was a family decision, something you and your wife, everyone kind of was on board with. What's this new life look like for not just you, but your family, just to kind of come to terms with like, okay, this is what the new normal is?
Yeah, it's a lot simpler now because I'm older and my kids are grown. So really what it was we had the press conference. My wife was here for 4 days looking to rent something, and she said, where should I look? What kind of, and Gruden and Gunther and those guys are out there somewhere, and they were telling me what a great neighborhood it is, but we didn't have to worry about schools or anything like that. Let's be realistic. It's about a 16-month time frame, so you're looking to rent, not buy. And I said, honey, as long as we're within 5 minutes of the facility in Alameda, I'm good. Have fun, check it out, look all over the place, but 5 minutes. And so I've been in the Hampton Inn ever since. She flew back to Philly. She found a place for us, which we're not in yet. I'm hoping we get in either later this week or next week, but we're not in yet. And she had a Thelma and Louise adventure last week. She and her best friend and the dog jumped in the car in Philadelphia and drove to Oakland. and they got there Saturday. Yeah, they got there Saturday afternoon. I took them out to dinner. They took me to the airport, and I took the red eye here. So that's been my life since the last time I saw you guys.
Is the new place within 5 minutes from
Yes,
the facility?
it's 3.5. And I could actually apparently take a bike path too. But she told me I have to get a miner's helmet because it'll be dark.
When you did your deep dive of the roster, was there a strength you found, or is there a position group that you liked more than other groups, or think you're well stocked at?
I mean, you look at that roster, and offensively, the center and the guards have been good football players, right? They drafted 2 good tackles, I think, last year that have a chance to be good football players. So I think you always want to be strong up front. I mean, I grew up the son of a coach that was an offensive line coach at one point. So I've always been an inside-out guy. And I think right now with the center and the 2 guards, they're pretty good in the middle there. You'd like to see a big jump from those tackles. Year 2 is typically where you get your biggest jump with young guys. So you'd like to see a big jump there. I think anybody knows we could use some speed at wide receiver, you know. I think defensively we need speed everywhere. I think our defensive tackles are pretty good. We got a couple young defensive tackles I like that again, looking for a pop in year 2. Tahir Whitehead's a good football player, really solid. And I think we need to get better on the back end. I think Carl Joseph played well at the end of the year, and they did a nice job finding a role for him. But without getting real specific, I mean, I just think that when you're looking at a team that's 4-12, there are a lot of holes, and I think you guys know it even as much or more than I do, following the team like you have.